So once you've considered whether you want to establish cause, whether the effect over time is of interest to you, and how broadly you want to generalize, then we have to get down to more detail in defining exactly what your research question is. So first, in the case of generalizing, this is really a question of external validity, as you heard in the other YouTube video that I asked you to watch. The idea here is, can findings be applied to other behaviors, people, or contexts? So in the case of is it a good idea to go to college? Well, that can depend on the career an individual wants. So it may be worthwhile for someone who wants to be a doctor to go to college, but it may not be worthwhile for someone who wants to be a salesperson to go to college. It can depend. So whether that answer generalizes across all occupations, that is a relevant question. Is it a good idea to lose weight? Sometimes it is. There's not clear evidence that if your BMI is not over 30, that you should lose weight. And what kind of history do you have, and risk factors and so forth. So an answer may not generalize across all people. Do teams perform better than individuals? Again, the answer probably doesn't generalize all kinds of problems that you may encounter at work. It can depend on whether on the characteristics of the team, on the type of problem that they're being asked to solve, and the context and environment at work. Last, do work-life balance initiatives help profits at an organizational level? We really don't know. We don't have enough data to give any kind of answer on that yet. If it is important to you to generalize your findings broadly, then you're going to have to identify a population of interest, whatever that is. And if you want to generalize broadly, it has to be a population that is fairly broad. So are you interested in generalizing to all US managers, or just managers of a certain type? You're going to need to evaluate where you are with your research question. Once you've decided how broadly you want to generalize and define that population, then you need to draw an unbiased sample from that population. The easiest way to get or most straightforward way to get an unbiased sample is to use random selection, where every member of that population can be enumerated and each member has an equal chance of being selected into your research project. So in randomized controlled trials in medicine, that is what they're trying to do, to ensure that findings from those generalize broadly. They use thousands of individuals and watch them over time to make sure that they can apply the findings that they have from those individuals to the entire US population in the case of most FDA drugs designed for the broader US population. Similarly, in operations research, design of experiments, or DOE, the idea is they're sampling hundreds of items from a production line and able to make some conclusions that apply to all of those kinds of items from the production line. If you're only interested in narrow generalization or not generalizing at all, then you can select a particular individual, group, organization, or context to try and investigate and understand more deeply what's happening within that context. It allows you to investigate a novel or unique event, a particular leader and what their style is, or a particular team, or a particular product development life cycle even would be something that you could investigate, understanding that the generalization may not be broad, it may be very narrow. Chrysler innovations and Chrysler sales to Fiat, right? So mergers and acquisitions are almost always unique kinds of events. We have been able to make some conclusions about them. It's pretty easy to tally up the number of them that go well and the number that don't, and to say it's a risky thing. But in general, those would be interesting things to investigate, but narrowly generalizable. Training implementation at BGSU or training implementation anywhere might be something that would be narrowly generalizable because it might be unique to a particular company or a group within the company, or a particular type of training that you would be interested in. Levels of analysis and generalization. The idea is that if you're looking at individuals or groups or a whole organization, you need to understand how much you're interested in measuring at the individual level of individuals. Do you want your change initiative to impact individuals? Do you want that change initiative to impact the whole team? Or do you want that change initiative to impact the organization? If you want individual impacts, and you're going to need to measure things at the individual level. If you want team impacts, you're going to need to measure things at the team level. Likewise, if you want an organizational impact, you will need to measure things at the whole organization level, like profit might be one. So some other examples: how do people respond to personality tests and selection? That is all at the individual or person level of analysis. What team characteristics lead to effective team performance? So we aren't interested in the individuals in the team, we're interested in characterizing the team as a whole unit and then evaluating the whole unit's performance. And then last, what family-friendly organizational policies exist among high-performing organizations? So there we're interested in organization policy as it relates to organization performance. You can have cross-level or multi-level kinds of questions. Can we teach people, individuals, do an individual intervention to lead effective teams, measuring team performance? Does procedural justice violation for one team member, that is an individual level, affect the team's performance? Now is the team performing differently as a group? What types of organization policy changes improve a company's reputation among customers? So now we have organization level. Is it impacting individual level? Those are cross-level or multi-level kinds of research questions. It is important to not assume isomorphism. Don't assume that because you found a particular relation at the individual level that will also persist when we're looking at individuals to teams, or teams to individuals, or teams to organization, or organization to individuals, any of that you need to test to determine if you can claim the sameness of relations from one level of analysis to another. Are you interested in establishing cause? And this is a question about internal validity, meaning specifically, can you say that your independent variable, the variable you're manipulating, caused a change in the dependent variable, that is the one you're interested in, the outcome? It requires all other potential causes to be ruled out, or what we call controlled. In some examples, does walking on the beach cause skin cancer? Do seatbelts prevent death? Does being more educated cause an increase in life satisfaction? So the issue here is walking on the beach, of course, does not cause skin cancer, right? It is UV light. So if you're walking at night, there should be no relation between the two. We have a third variable that can explain any relation that we might observe between time spent walking on the beach and skin cancer. Seatbelts and death. Seatbelts are very effective in preventing death from a car accident. So under a particular circumstance of death, it is very effective. Then last, does being more educated cause an increase in life satisfaction? Rather, there are other variables, not just being more educated, but if you have meaningful work, which is more likely if you're educated, if you have better health care, if you're at a higher socioeconomic status, which is likely if you're better educated, and you have engaging friends, right? Those are the things that seem to be more primary causes of life satisfaction than just being more educated. Is it important to establish cause for you? If so, then you're going to need to use an experimental design where you use random assignment and you have a control condition. That is, you use random assignment to allocate people to two different levels, at least two levels of your independent variable, so that some people experience a training program and others do not, and you essentially flipped a coin to figure out who was going to get it and who wasn't going to get it. Descriptive research, on the other hand, allows for observing relations among two variables, even if they're not causal. Typically, descriptive research is used for theory building. Both have problems with generalization, however. Is it ethical to randomly assign groups? right? We can't always randomly assign people to experience training or not. It may be viewed as required training to get to the next level. There can be a variety of things that would prevent you from using an experimental design, particularly in a real organization. Is it possible to control all the relevant variables? Often we can't control all the relevant variables because we simply don't know what all of them are. Every day there's so many things going on, and workplaces are very complex. So it can be very difficult to make sure you're ruling out all of the potential third variables that might be responsible for your finding. And then last, is it even interesting once everything else is controlled? Work is dynamic, and it's important to understand how work happens in that dynamic environment. So controlling things in a laboratory setting, for example, may not be how you would want to go about doing your research, but you'll have to make that judgment. Types of descriptive research include a quasi-experiment, where there isn't random assignment, but one pre-existing group, does get some level of an independent variable that another group doesn't. The group that doesn't get it would be considered the control group. Causal comparative research is more common in educational literature. In this case, it also has no random assignment, and there are pre-existing groups with the characteristic of interest. So rather than one group being assigned a level of an independent variable, now that group just naturally has that level of the independent variable that's of interest to you. Then last, in correlational research, we have a group with a characteristic of interest, and we're looking to describe relations among entities in that group with some other variable of interest. Note that none of these can identify a causal relation, right? And we often get confused or want to make assertions that go beyond what's appropriate, but none of these can identify cause. Then last, is the passage of time of interest? If it is, then you must use what's called a longitudinal design. So for example, what is the process people go through when learning how to work with a new boss? So if you're interested in how people evolve over time, then you must measure people at multiple points in time. Do people gain skills from a training program? You're going to have to measure people over time. In this case, at least before and after the training program. Do organizations go through phases like the product life cycle, and introduction, growth, maturity, and decline? In this case, again, you would need a longitudinal design. If you aren't interested in a question as it unfolds over time, then you can use a cross-sectional design. Are managers more stressed than individual contributors? You can, at one point in time, evaluate who's a manager, who isn't, what are reported stress levels, or stress measured another way. Do middle managers, first-line supervisors, and individual contributors differ in how much they trust executive management? Here's another cross-section. Figure out who's in which type of job. Is there a difference among those three groups and level of trust? Together, these things comprise what I like to call the research cube. And you have a template available in Canvas that I would ask for you at this point to get out and print out and make your own research cube. You're going to be challenged to label all the cells consistent with how we have them arranged here. And I'm going to go through all of that next.